Hello. Today I want to talk to you about not getting things right the first time, about editing. So I have a couple of proof prints here of my Bucks design, the one with the frame, the more graphic style one. And I want to show you how I work when it comes to making corrections. So normally, because I work with reduction with Lino, I wouldn't be in a position to take a proof and make corrections, but I do this all the time for Japanese woodblock, which is a multi-block process. So this is something I'm quite used to in a different medium. So you can see here I've got a couple of proofs that I've run off of this print, and there are lots of corrections that I want to make. I'm kind of new in my head what colours I wanted and the kind of feel that I wanted for the picture. But you can see, what I do is I take a proof and then I sit down and I write all over it. It's not that I'm going to study those notes later, it's more that by writing things down I kind of get my head around them better. Some of the things are to do with registration and how the block is lining up. So for example, in this corner here I've got a little error where the blocks are of two slightly different widths. Some of it is thoughts about the kind of colours that I want. So here, for example, it's the wrong blue. The sky isn't right at all at the moment in this print. And some of it is about changing the shape of things. So in this example here, this section with the shadow just about here is too heavy. It's not really working for me. So I make myself lots of notes and then I can make adjustments to the block. And how I adjust the block I'm going to show you in a moment. But for now, if you just look at this shadow here on this print, you can see on the second version here I've cut a bit more away and it's sitting better. It's just got a better flow to it. And the sky, I've changed the blue of the sky. It's still not quite right, but you know, it's an improvement. And I'm making corrections all the time. So even though it's a multi-block print, I expect to be able to alter and correct it as I go along. So now I'm going to show you the Bucks natural print and how I'm actually making changes in my head when I look at the proof print and how I'm practically making those to the block so that I can cut them correctly. These are two very bad, I have to say, proof prints from the more naturalistic version of this Bucks landscape. So when I originally designed this and I was talking to you about how I was going to divide up the prints, I visualised them as both being daytime green grass type prints. And then as I finished proofing the more graphic version, I suddenly thought, wouldn't it be nice to do an evening version, a sort of dusk version where I could really use transparency and show that in the printing. And so changing the whole way the print works means quite a lot of editing. So the first thing I did was to do some printing here just to get a feel for what might be needed, and there's lots wrong with this, but the main problem I had to start with were the clouds, because in this evening sky, if this had been a daytime sky, I could have had the white of the paper to do the job of the paler parts of the cloud, but in the evening I don't want a bright white, I want a kind of golden feeling to it. So suddenly I needed a block under the clouds to give me that golden colour rather than using the white of the paper. So if I pop those aside for a moment, I'll show you what I did. I had a block here. This was going to be my shadow block, the last block that I printed that was going to do, as you can see, all the dark shading in the tree and the dark shading in the foreground. And it can still do that. But I've decided to sacrifice the dark shading in the bushes and the conifer over here in favour of using this area of the block to be the cloud, so that I can get that. If I pop that back, you can probably see it more clearly here in this one, this yellowy colour. So I used, to mark where the cloud goes, I used the method that I showed you in a previous video where I was offsetting, I was printing onto tracing paper and then printing that wet ink back down off the tracing paper onto the block to give me guidance. You can see the red ink here from me doing exactly that for a different part of the print. So here, this is my third block, which is also a shadow block. This is a mid-tone shadow block for this print. And you can see I've inked it up with the red ink. And this is water-based ink, which I want to talk to you about in a minute because I've discovered something in this process. So I've offset this red ink using the tracing paper method onto this block because having taken this proof, I've now decided that I do not want this part here. I want to lose this field because it's making the field too golden. That the gold colour I need here is printing in the field and that's affecting it. So I need to chop this bit out. So in order to know which bit to chop, I've printed that shadow block onto tracing paper back down onto this block, and now I know exactly where that field ends, so I can chop away this part knowing that it's going to be accurate when I print it. So I've been doing that, having seen this proof for various parts of the block. Here you can see it's printed on this block. This block is doing the whole of the sky and down through the foreground. And again, I've decided that I will probably lose quite a lot, cut away quite a lot of this back field again and get rid of it. So I need the guidance there as to where places end. And there are also corrections I need to make. Hopefully you can see we've got a registration problem in that the clouds end there and the sky ends up here. So I can see where to cut because I've printed that block, and I can see where the gap is and where I need to adjust. You can see it really clearly here as well. So I'm going to cut the top off there as well. So I'm making adjustments all the time. I don't know if there's anyone who gets it right first time, but I certainly don't. So if I were doing a woodblock print, it's exactly what I'd be doing. I'd be doing this proof, which frankly, the colours are wrong. There's a lot wrong with it, but it's giving me the guidance as to where I want to go when I do the proper prints. And the next thing I want to show you is about using water-based ink and how it works with lino when it dries. So in the course of making this film, I've discovered something about water-based ink. In my previous film where I was using water-based ink to print onto the lino, as I have done here, I said that it was a good idea to use water-based ink because it dries quickly and then you can get on with your cutting, and I stand by that. It's great for that. Sometimes people ask me about, can I stain my lino with water-based ink so that I can cut? And I always stain with oil-based ink because I always have. And so I always sort of say, well, wash it off before you start cutting. But what I've found is that if you print onto the lino to edit or what have you, and the ink dries on the lino, and I've got a damp cloth here, and I come along and I give it a good wiping, because it's water-based ink, most of it comes off, but you are left with a stain, as you can see there. And you would think, well, you've given it a rub with your wet cloth and it's come off. You'd think, well, you're okay with that. But what I've found is that when you come to ink up and you get some fresh ink, water-based ink again, onto your lino, and you start working it, that will then, and hopefully you can see this, will start to lift the ink, and it's very subtle. This was going slightly pink there, but I'll show you when I clean this off again with my damp cloth. So I'm doing the same thing again, giving it a bit of a rub with a damp cloth. Can you see now all that red ink has gone? So that red ink would have got into my white ink and turned it slightly pink. So be really wary of using a water-based stain on your lino. If you're going to do it, then what I'd say is have some trash ink and just ink up the block and use it to clean the block. So that was sort of really unintended little discovery that I made. The other thing I should say is that we're having a thunderstorm at the moment, so you might be able to hear the rain going on and maybe some thunder. So the final bit of talking about this version of my print, let me just get the proof copy in, is just a shout out for the inspiration on this, which again comes from Japanese woodblock printing. Evening light, such as I'm showing in these Bucks prints, is quite a tricky thing, and I find there's a printmaker that I find really useful for this, and his name is Hiroshi Yoshida. He was a Japanese woodblock printmaker, and 1876 to 1950, I can tell you that because it says so in the captions here. And he just had a really good eye for that kind of evening light. This example, it's quite a sort of peachy sort of sky he's got there, but let me show you another one of his woodblock prints. There are various versions of this particular print, and I think this is really clever. He kind of has such a good eye for the kind of non-colour of evening light, and when I look at those, I often look at these for kind of ideas about colour and transparency. So that really affects my lino cut. So when I come to do this Bucks print, I'll try and show you how you can achieve that feeling of kind of ethereal transparency, but in lino ink rather than in Japanese watercolour woodblock printing. The final thing I wanted to show you is how I edit when I'm doing a reduction print. So reduction lino, if you followed my previous series, you'll know, is where you cut away the block as you create the print. So everything comes from the one printing block of lino, which means of course you can't make a proof and make lots of corrections. So what I do is what I've got here, which is I have, this is my latest print that I've been working on, which I've just finished. And this is my, what I would call sacrificial print. The print where I have, I decide, let's say I'm going to print 16 prints in the edition. So I'll make sure that I have 17, so that I have one that is a sacrificial print where I do all the kind of experiments with colour and things as I go, and then I can adjust things. So this is my sacrificial print, and it's got a lot wrong with it, probably hard to spot apart from this line block, all the little lines on it. And when I came to print the final block, which is all the detail of the lines in the foreground, I thought it would be nice to do it in colour, and I mixed up all these nice colours, printed it, hated it. So obviously it was wrong, but having this sacrificial print meant that I could actually go from what I thought was a brilliant idea, put it down on paper and think, oh no, that doesn't work, and make an adjustment. So what I ended up with in the edition was actually printing the line block in a transparent grey, and just dropping in areas of slightly darker grey here and there. And because it's a transparent grey, it takes on the colour of the landscape anyway. And so that's how I work with reduction print. Just as an aside, the other thing that I would say about this is that fantastically complicated piece of cutting, but not all of it really shows. There's quite a lot of cutting there that you would have, once it's printed, that you'd have to look at really closely to see, and that's fine. That's kind of what I want for the print. So even when I've gone to the effort to do a lot of really fine detail cutting, if I feel it benefits the print for it to be virtually invisible, then it's virtually invisible. So it's not always about trying to show off your cutting all the time. Sometimes I'll do cutting and it comes and goes in the print. So I hope that's helped you to see that editing is absolutely fine. It's perfectly normal. I do it as I go along the whole time, and that you'll join me for the next film.